The story begins, as so many do, not with a great event, but with a quiet observation. In a small village, nestled in the fertile plains beyond the Oxus River, where the dust of the Silk Road settled on the leaves of mulberry trees, there lived a boy named Zain. He was not a prince, nor the son of a wealthy merchant. His father was a potter, a man whose hands knew the language of clay and water, and his mother was a weaver, whose fingers danced with threads of indigo and saffron. Zain's world was one of simple, beautiful patterns. He saw them in the spiraling cracks of a sun-baked riverbed, in the perfect geometry of a honeycomb, and in the intricate designs his mother wove into her carpets. But most of all, he saw them in the sky. Every night, when the village had settled into a soft, breathing silence, Zain would climb to the flat roof of his family's small, earthen home. He would lie on his back on a worn rug, the clay still warm from the day's sun, and watch the great, celestial loom weave its tapestry of light. He did not know the names the astronomers in the great cities gave the stars, but he gave them his own. There was the shepherd's crook, the weaver's shuttle, the potter's wheel. He saw that they were not scattered randomly, but moved with a slow, majestic, and predictable grace. They were a story written in fire, and he longed with a quiet ache in his young heart to learn how to read it. His teacher was an old man named Yusuf, who had once traveled to the great city of Baghdad in his youth. Yusuf's eyes were clouded with age, but his mind was as sharp as a shard of obsidian. He taught Zain to read and write, not just the flowing script of their own language, but the numbers that had come from the distant land of India. He showed Zain how a simple circle, a naught, a asterisk, SIFR asterisk, could hold the power of emptiness in place, transforming calculation from a clumsy affair of pebbles and abacuses into an elegant dance of symbols. "The universe, my boy," Yusuf would say, his voice a dry rustle like autumn leaves, "is a book. It is written in the language of numbers, patterns, and light. To study them is to listen to the voice of the Creator." One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, Yusuf beckoned Zain to his side. He held a small, leather-bound book. It was worn and softened by countless hands. "I am an old man, Zain," he said, his gaze fixed on the rising moon. "My journey is nearing its end, but yours is just beginning." In the city of Baghdad, the Caliph has built a place called the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. It is a library, a school, an observatory, all in one. They say scholars from every land and every faith gather there, like rivers flowing into a great sea. They are taking all the knowledge of the world, the geometry of the Greeks, the astronomy of the Persians, the numbers of the Indians, and translating it, studying it, building upon it. He pressed the book into Zain's hands. It was a collection of poems by a Persian mystic. "This is all I have of value, but I will also give you a letter. It is to a man I knew long ago, a translator at the House of Wisdom. I do not know if he still lives, or if he would remember a dusty traveler from the East. But it is a chance. You see the patterns in all things, Zain. Your heart is curious and your mind is quiet. Such a mind is fertile ground for knowledge. You must go to Baghdad." The thought was a seed of light planted in the dark soil of Zain's mind. Baghdad. The name itself was a kind of music, a promise of wonders beyond his imagining. He felt a tremor of fear, the fear of leaving the only home he had ever known, but it was quickly overshadowed by a pull as strong and as silent as the moon's pull on the tides. His parents, seeing the distant look in their son's eyes, understood. His mother wove him a sturdy satchel, her tears falling silently onto the threads. His father gave him a small pouch of coins, his hands, rough with clay, resting on Zain's shoulders with a weight that spoke more than words. And so, one cool morning before the dawn, Zain joined a caravan of merchants heading west. He turned to look back at his small village, a cluster of sleeping shapes in the gray twilight, and whispered a quiet farewell. The journey had begun. The first page of his own great story was turning. The caravan was a slow, meandering river of life. It flowed across vast, open plains, through the shadows of stark purple mountains, and into the shimmering emptiness of the desert. For Zayn, every day was a lesson. The days were measured by the rhythmic, swaying gait of the camels, their bells a gentle, hypnotic chime that became the soundtrack to his thoughts. The nights were measured by the shifting of the stars he knew so well, watching them wheel across a sky of such profound and velvety blackness that he felt he could fall into it forever. He listened to the merchants' stories, tales of distant ports where spices scented the air, of strange animals and stranger customs. He learned about the winds and the subtle signs of a coming sandstorm. He learned the taste of brackish water from a desert well and the profound sweetness of a simple date shared around a crackling campfire. He was no longer just a boy from a village. He was a traveler, a small part of the great flow of humanity that crisscrossed the known world. He spent his time reading the book of poems Yusuf had given him. The verses spoke of finding the divine in the smallest of things, a dewdrop on a rose petal, the pattern of a bird's flight. They taught him that wonder was a form of prayer, and that the search for knowledge was a path to understanding the magnificent artistry of the universe. The journey took many months. The seasons turned. The harsh sun of summer softened into the golden light of autumn. Zayn's face was browned by the sun. His hands were calloused, but his eyes were bright with a steady, quiet fire. He was no longer a boy, but a young man on the cusp of his life's purpose. Then, one afternoon, the lead camel driver pointed to the horizon. At first, Zayn saw nothing but a hazy shimmer. But as they drew closer, a dark line appeared, and then another, and another. It was a forest, but not of trees. It was a forest of minarets, domes, and buildings, all shimmering in the heat. And snaking through it all was a ribbon of silver, so bright it hurt the eyes, the great river Tigris. "Baghdad," the driver said, his voice filled with a mixture of reverence and pride. "The center of the world." As the caravan passed through the city's immense gates, Zayn was overwhelmed. The quiet, predictable rhythms of his village and the slow, meditative pace of the desert had not prepared him for this. The city was a symphony of 1,000 different sounds. The clamor of the marketplace, with vendors shouting in a dozen languages. The rhythmic clang of coppersmiths, hammers. The call to prayer echoing from 100 minarets. The gentle murmur of water in countless fountains. The air was thick with a tapestry of smells, roasting meat, exotic spices, fragrant perfumes, the dust of the crowded streets, and the rich, loamy scent of the well-watered gardens that seemed to be hidden behind every wall. The city was built in a series of perfect circles, a design of breathtaking logic and beauty. It was a living, breathing testament to the pattern Zayn had always loved, but on a scale he could never have conceived. He felt very small, a single drop of water in a vast and churning ocean. He clutched the letter from Yusuf in his satchel, its familiar crinkle, a small anchor in this overwhelming new world. He asked for directions to the Beit al-Hikmah, and people pointed him toward the heart of the city, their expressions a mixture of respect and curiosity. A young man, alone, and with the dust of a long journey on him, seeking the house of wisdom. Finally, he stood before it. It was not one building, but a sprawling complex of halls, courtyards, and gardens, connected by cool, shaded walkways. It was grand, yet it did not feel imposing. It felt peaceful. The air here was different. The clamor of the city faded, replaced by the soft rustle of paper, the quiet scratching of reed pens, and the murmur of low, thoughtful conversation. The scent of jasmine and roses drifted from the gardens, mingling with the dry, sweet smell of aging parchment and ink. Taking a deep breath, Zayn entered. He felt as though he were crossing a threshold not just into a building, but into a different state of being. He had arrived. Inside the main courtyard of the Beit al-Hikmah, a fountain carved from a single piece of marble whispered a constant, soothing song. Sunlight, filtered through intricately carved wooden screens, dappled the polished tile floors in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Scholars of all ages and appearances moved with a quiet purpose. Some were old men with long white beards, their robes flowing around them like ancient rivers. Others were young and eager, their eyes bright with the fire of new ideas. Zayn saw men in the turbans of Persia, the simple caps of Syria, and the flowing robes of the desert Bedouin. He even saw a few men with fair hair and pale eyes, Nestorian Christians from the north, speaking in Aramaic as they huddled over a manuscript. This was not just a house of books, it was a house of minds. Zayn, feeling the humble cloth of his travel-stained tunic, felt a renewed wave of insignificance. He was a potter's son with a single book of poems and a letter to a man who might not even remember his old friend. He approached a kindly-looking man who was shelving a collection of scrolls and, with a voice that was barely a whisper, asked for a translator named Ishak. The man's eyes, crinkled at the corners from years of smiling and squinting at small text, lit up. "Ah, Ishak, the master of Greek!" "You'll find him where he always is, battling with Aristotle. Follow the scent of the oldest paper. He is in the West Wing, in the Hall of Translation." Zayn followed the directions, his heart a nervous drum against his ribs. He entered a long, high-ceilinged hall. The air was thick with the scent the librarian had described, a rich, complex aroma of old paper, leather bindings, and the sharp, earthy smell of ink. Sunlight streamed in from high, arched windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny, golden sprites in the still air. Along both sides of the hall, scribes and scholars sat at low wooden desks, bent over manuscripts with intense, silent concentration. The only sounds were the whisper of turning pages and the soft, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch of reed pens on parchment. At the far end of the hall, in a pool of bright sunlight, sat an old man. His hair was a thin, white halo around a deeply tanned and wrinkled face. He was hunched over two open books, one written in the elegant, angular script of Greek, the other in the flowing curves of Arabic. He would read a passage from the Greek, his finger tracing the words, then close his eyes for a long moment, his lips moving silently. Finally, he would dip his pen in a small pot of ink and write, with slow, deliberate precision, in the Arabic codex. Zayn approached hesitantly. "Master Ishak?" he ventured. The old man looked up, his eyes a startlingly clear and intelligent blue. They were the eyes of a man who looked not just at the world, but through it. "I am he," Ishak said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And who are you, young man, to disturb my argument with this stubborn old Greek?" Zayn bowed his head respectfully and held out the letter. "I am Zayn from the East. I bring a letter from a man named Yusuf, who says he knew you long ago." Ishak took the letter, his brow furrowed. He broke the seal and read, his eyes scanning the page. A slow smile spread across his face, softening the sharp lines of his concentration. "Yusuf, a good man, a thirsty mind. I remember him well. We spent a week arguing about the true meaning of a single line from Plato. He had the soul of a scholar. And he says you do too." Ishak looked at Zayn, truly seeing him for the first time. He saw the dust of the road, but he also saw the clear, curious light in the young man's eyes. "Yusuf asked me to give you a chance. A place to start. The House of Wisdom is not a place one simply joins. It is a place one earns. Can you read? Can you write a clear and steady hand?" "Yes, master," Zayn said, his voice gaining a little strength. "Good," Ishak nodded. "Then your work will begin, as all our work begins, with the words of others. You will be a copyist. There is a great demand for the works we translate. A single book can take a team of us a year to render from Greek or Syriac or Sanskrit into Arabic. Once we are satisfied with the translation, it must be copied carefully and precisely so that the knowledge can spread to other libraries, other cities, other minds." He gestured to a small, empty desk in the corner. "That will be your place. Your first task will be Euclid. His Elements. J. It is a book of pure, cold, beautiful logic, the foundation of geometry. Copy it. Do not simply trace the shapes of the letters. Read the words. Understand the proofs. Feel the elegance of a line of reasoning that begins with a simple axiom and ends with an irrefutable truth. Your payment will be a small stipend, a room in the scholars' quarters, and a daily meal. But the true payment, he said, tapping a finger on the Greek manuscript before him, is this, the work itself. Welcome to the House of Wisdom, Zain. And so Zain's life in Baghdad began. It was a life of quiet routine, yet every day felt like a profound discovery. He would wake before dawn, wash in the cool water of the courtyard fountain, and eat a simple breakfast of bread, olives, and cheese with the other junior scribes. Then he would take his place at his desk in the great hall of translation. His first days were spent simply learning the craft. He learned how to trim a reed pen to the perfect angle, how to mix his own ink from soot and gum arabic until it was a deep, permanent black. He learned the rhythm of the work. Copy a line, read it back, check it against the original, and then copy the next. It was slow, meticulous, and deeply meditative. His first manuscript was, as Ishaq had promised, Euclid's Elements, not a line. At first, the words and diagrams were just abstract shapes to be replicated. But as the days turned into weeks, Zain began to follow the advice of his new mentor. He started to asterisk read. He saw how Euclid built a magnificent, unshakable palace of logic from a few simple, self-evident truths. He felt a thrill, a deep, resonant satisfaction when he understood a proof, seeing how one step led inevitably to the next, as perfect and preordained as the rising of the sun. The patterns he had seen in the natural world, he now realized, had an underlying grammar. Geometry was the language that described the shape of God's thoughts. He worked with a silent, unwavering focus that did not go unnoticed. Ishaq would often pause in his own work and watch the young man. He saw that Zain's copies were not just accurate, they were beautiful. His script was clear and elegant, his diagrams precise. But more than that, he saw the light of understanding in Zain's eyes. This was not a boy simply performing a task. This was a mind awakening. One evening, as Zain was carefully cleaning his pens before leaving for the day, Ishaq came and sat beside him. "You have finished with Euclid," Ishaq said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes, master," Zain replied. "I have made 3 copies. And what have you learned from the old Greek?" Zain hesitated, trying to find the right words. "I have learned that truth can be built, that it is not just something to be believed, but something that can be demonstrated, step by step, for all to see. It is a very peaceful thing to know." Ishaq smiled, a rare and genuine expression of warmth. A peaceful thing to know. Yes, that is it, exactly. Many men seek knowledge for power or for wealth, but the knowledge we seek here in this house is for understanding. And understanding is the foundation of peace. You have the heart of a scholar, Zain. You are ready for more than just copying. The next day, Ishaq moved Zain to a desk closer to his own. He placed a new manuscript in front of him. It was a work by the great physician Galen, but it was not a perfect copy. It was a Syriac translation of the original Greek, and it was filled with passages that were confusing and contradictory. "Our task now," Ishaq said, his voice low and serious, "is not just to copy, but to heal. This text is wounded. Somewhere in its journey from Greek to Syriac, the meaning has been bruised, perhaps broken. We have another copy, translated by a different scholar 50 years ago. And we have a few fragments of the original Greek. Your job is to help me compare them, word by word, sentence by sentence. We will be like detectives, hunting for the author's original intent. We will argue, we will debate, we will consult dictionaries and grammars. We will wrestle with this text until it yields its truth. This, Zain, is the true work of translation." Zain felt a thrill that was part excitement, part terror. He was being invited to step out of the chorus and become part of the song itself. His journey into the heart of the House of Wisdom had truly begun. The work was painstaking. It was a form of intellectual archaeology. Zayn and Ishaq would spend an entire morning debating the meaning of a single Greek word. Ishaq would explain the subtle shades of meaning it could have, how its connotation might have changed over the centuries. Zayn, with his fresh eyes, would sometimes see a connection or a pattern that the more experienced scholar had overlooked. "Look, master," Zayn might say, pointing with a slender finger. In this other fragment, Galen uses a similar phrase when describing the nerves of the eye. Perhaps this word here, which we have translated as channel, would be better understood as pathway, suggesting not just a hollow tube, but a route for a message. Ishaq would lean back, stroking his white beard, his blue eyes distant in thought. A pathway, a route for a message. Yes, that fits the context far better. It makes the entire paragraph clearer. Well done, Zayn. You see, we are not just changing words. We are restoring clarity. We are letting the light of an old mind shine through again. Through this slow, meticulous process, Zayn learned more than he could have imagined. He learned the anatomy of the human body from Galen. He learned about the properties of plants and minerals from Dioscorides. And with every text, he learned more about the delicate art of language itself. He learned that translation was not a simple act of substitution, but a deep and empathetic engagement with another mind from another time. It was a conversation across centuries. He also began to interact with the other scholars in the house. During the midday break, they would gather in the gardens, sitting on cool marble benches in the shade of orange trees, the air sweet with the scent of blossoms. Here, the intense silence of the translation hall was replaced by a vibrant but gentle hum of discussion. A mathematician with a fiery glint in his eye might be excitedly explaining a new method for solving equations to a philosopher who would listen patiently before asking, "But what is a number truly? Is it a thing that exists in the world or only an idea in our minds?" An astronomer would describe his latest observations of the moon's movements, and a physician would ask if the phases of the moon could have an effect on human health. The discussions were never angry or competitive. They were collaborative, a collective polishing of ideas. Everyone understood that they were all, in their own way, trying to read a different page of the same great book, the universe. Zayn, at first, was a silent observer, soaking in the torrent of ideas. He was in awe of these men, whose minds could leap from the smallest particle of matter to the grandest sweep of the cosmos. But slowly, encouraged by Ishaq, he began to participate. He would ask a question, tentatively at first, and would be met not with condescension, but with genuine interest. His perspective, that of a young man with a clear mind uncluttered by years of established doctrine, was valued. One afternoon, Zayn was sitting with Ishaq beneath a flowering almond tree when a man of striking intensity joined them. He had a dark, neatly trimmed beard and eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. He carried a small wooden board covered in a thin layer of sand. This was Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar whose name was already whispered with reverence in the halls of the Beitul Hikmah. "Ishaq, my friend," he said, his voice resonating with passion. "I believe I have found it, a universal method, a way to solve for the unknown." He sat down, placing the sandboard between them. With a pointed stick, he began to draw symbols and numbers in the sand. Zayn watched, mesmerized. He was used to the clear, visual logic of Euclid's geometry. This was something different. It was like a kind of poetry, a language of symbols. "We are often faced with problems of inheritance or commerce or the division of land," al-Khwarizmi explained, his stick dancing across the sand. "We know some quantities, but not others. For example, we know that Aki thing and 10 roots are equal to 39 dirhams. What is the value of the thing? We are stuck. It is unbalanced." He drew a line, then another. "But what if we could perform operations on both sides of the problem to restore the balance? What if we could take this negative quantity here," he said, pointing to a term, and move it to the other side, where it becomes positive. This act of restoring, or completion, in Arabic, al-jabra, allows us to simplify the problem. He continued to manipulate the symbols, his movements quick and certain. Zayn felt his mind stretching. Al-Khwarizmi was not using diagrams of shapes and lines like Euclid. He was using pure symbols to represent abstract quantities. He was creating a system, a set of rules, that could be applied to any problem of a similar type. It was a powerful, elegant, new tool for thinking. After a few more steps, Al-Khwarizmi drew a final triumphant line. And so the thing is equal to 3. He looked up, his eyes shining. It is a method that will always work. It brings the unknown into the light of the known. Ishaq looked at the sandboard with deep admiration. You have created a new language, Muhammad, a language for finding balance. Zayn stared at the symbols. Blah, blah, the restoration. He saw it not just as a mathematical trick, but as a profound philosophical concept. It was about taking a chaotic, unbalanced situation and, through a series of logical, peaceful steps, bringing it to a state of harmony and resolution. It was the same satisfaction he had felt when understanding a geometric proof, but amplified. It was the music of reason itself. In the weeks that followed, Zayn sought out Al-Khwarizmi. He offered to help the great mathematician, to check his calculations and make fair copies of his work. Al-Khwarizmi, seeing the young man's genuine passion and quick mind, agreed. Zayn spent his days with Ishaq, wrestling with the words of the ancient Greeks, and his evenings with Al-Khwarizmi, exploring the new and exciting world of algebra. He learned that the Indian numerals he had studied as a boy, especially the concept of asterisk, SIFR asterisk, the zero, were the key that unlocked this new system. Without the zero, the elegant positional notation Al-Khwarizmi used would be impossible. He saw, with a sense of breathtaking clarity, how knowledge was a river fed by many streams. The numbers of India, the logic of Greece, the astronomical traditions of Persia, all flowing together here in Baghdad to create something new, something greater than the sum of its parts. His work on Al-Khwarizmi's treatise, which would one day be known as the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, was one of the proudest achievements of his young life. He was not the author, not the creator, but he was a part of it. He was a humble scribe, helping to give form to a revolutionary idea that he knew would change the world. He felt a deep, quiet joy, the joy of a craftsman who knows he is helping to build something beautiful and enduring. His world was expanding, from the patterns in the stars to the patterns of pure thought, and he felt his own mind expanding with it, becoming a small but vital part of the great collaborative quest for understanding that was the soul of the House of Wisdom. Years flowed by as smoothly and steadily as the Tigris passed the city walls. Zayn's youth softened into the quiet confidence of manhood. His hands, once hesitant, now moved with the fluid grace of a master scribe and translator. He was no longer Ishaq's apprentice, but his respected colleague. They worked side by side, a bridge between the ancient world and their own, bringing the light of Aristotle, Plato, and Archimedes into the vibrant intellectual life of Baghdad. The gardens of the Beit al-Hikmah remained his sanctuary. The debates continued, a constant, gentle polishing of the collective intellect. Zayn was now a confident participant, his voice adding to the harmonious inquiry. He had learned that a question could be as valuable as an answer, and that the phrase, "I don't know," was not a sign of weakness, but the very starting point of wisdom. One sweltering summer afternoon, a new scholar arrived from Basra. His name was Hassan ibn al-Haytham, a man with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. They were sharp, piercing, and filled with an insatiable curiosity. He was not a translator or a pure mathematician. He was an observer of the physical world, and he was troubled by a very old question. How do we see? The accepted wisdom, passed down from the great Greek thinkers like Euclid and Ptolemy, was that the eyes emitted rays of light. These rays would travel out from the eye, strike an object, and then return, carrying information about the object's shape and color. It was an idea that had stood for 1,000 years. But Hassan was not satisfied. He would sit in the gardens for hours, simply watching. He watched the way sunlight streamed through the leaves of a fig tree, creating a complex mosaic of light and shadow on the ground. He watched the way a stick appeared to bend when placed in the clear water of the fountain. "It does not make sense," he said to Zayn one day, as they sat in the shade. They had struck up a friendship, drawn together by a shared sense of wonder. "Think of the stars, Zayn. They are so far away. How could a ray emitted from my tiny eye travel all that way to a star and back in an instant? And how could my eye possibly emit enough rays to fill the entire vastness of the sky?" He shook his head, a gesture of profound intellectual dissatisfaction. "No. The theory is elegant, but it does not fit the evidence of our own senses. The world is the source of the light. The light travels from the object to the eye, not the other way around. The world impresses itself upon us. We do not impress ourselves upon the world." This was a radical idea. It challenged the very foundation of the science of optics. Many of the older scholars dismissed it out of hand. "Who are we to question Ptolemy?" they would mutter. But Hassan was not a man to be deterred by authority. "The first duty of a scholar," he told Zayn, "is not to believe what is written, but to test it. To question everything. Truth is the goal, no matter whose authority must be set aside to find it." To prove his theory, Hassan devised a series of ingenious experiments. He took Zayn to a small, windowless storeroom in the depths of the library. The room was pitch black, the air still and cool. Hassan had made a tiny, perfectly round hole in one of the wooden shutters that covered the only window. "Now watch," he whispered, his voice filled with anticipation. Outside, the sun was shining brightly on the central courtyard. On the wall of the dark room opposite the pinhole, a faint image began to appear. Zayn gasped. It was a perfect, miniature picture of the courtyard outside. The fountain, the orange trees, the scholars walking by, but it was upside down and reversed. "Do you see, Zayn?" Hassan said, his voice trembling with excitement. "My eye is emitting nothing. The light from the sun illuminates the fountain. The rays of light reflecting off the fountain travel in all directions in straight lines. The only rays that can enter this dark room are the ones that pass through this tiny hole. The rays from the top of the fountain travel downwards through the hole and strike the bottom of the wall. The rays from the bottom of the fountain travel upwards and strike the top. It is simple geometry. It is proof. We are not projecting our vision onto the world. The world is projecting itself into our eyes." Zayn felt a shiver run down his spine. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated discovery. In this small, dark room, they had overturned 1,000 years of thinking, not through argument or philosophy, but through a simple, elegant, and undeniable observation of the world itself. He realized that the House of Wisdom was not just a place for preserving old knowledge, but for creating new knowledge. The work of scholarship was not just to read, but to look. Hassan called this device the asterisk kamara asterisk, the Arabic word for a dark or private room. He built larger, more elaborate versions. He used them to study the nature of light, to prove that it traveled in straight lines. He studied lenses and mirrors, reflection and refraction. He conducted meticulous experiments on the human eye itself, dissecting the eyes of animals to understand their structure. He concluded that the lens of the eye focused the light onto a sensitive screen at the back, just as the pinhole focused the light onto the wall of the asterisk kamara. Zayn became his devoted assistant. He recorded Hassan's observations, drew precise diagrams of his experiments, and helped him write what would become his masterpiece, the 7-volume Book of Optics. The work was a monumental achievement, a perfect fusion of mathematical theory and rigorous experimentation. Working with Hassan taught Zayn a new way of knowing. With Ishaq, he had learned to listen to the voices of the past. With Al-Khwarizmi, he had learned the language of abstract reason. With Hassan, he learned to trust the evidence of his own senses, to see the world not just as a source of poetic beauty, but as a puzzle that could be understood through careful observation and experiment. His life was now a rich tapestry woven from these different threads. In the mornings, he might be translating a complex passage of Aristotle's philosophy, pondering the nature of the soul and the cosmos. In the afternoons, he could be found in a dark room with Hassan, measuring the angles of refraction of a beam of light passing through a glass sphere. In the evenings, he would meet with other scholars in the observatory that had been built on the highest point of the city walls. The observatory was a place of deep peace and profound wonder. Under the vast, silent dome of the desert sky, astronomers worked through the night. They were not just gazing at the stars, they were measuring them. They had enormous, finely crafted instruments, sextants and quadrants made of polished brass, to measure the precise position of the stars and planets. They were creating vast, detailed star charts, improving upon the work of the Greeks, making the map of the heavens more accurate than it had ever been. Zayn learned to use the astrolabe, a beautiful and intricate brass instrument that was like a mechanical model of the universe. By aligning its various plates and pointers with the stars, he could tell the time, determine the direction of Mecca, or predict the rising of the sun. Holding it in his hand on a cool, clear night, he felt a tangible connection to the celestial clockwork above. It was a tool that blended the highest mathematics with the most sublime beauty. He would sit there for hours, long after his official duties were done, simply looking up at the familiar patterns he had loved since he was a boy, the shepherd's crook, the weaver's shuttle. But now he saw them with new eyes. He saw them not just as pictures, but as distant suns, moving with a mathematical precision he now understood. He saw the geometry of Euclid in their orbits, the algebra of al-Khwarizmi in the equations that could predict their positions, and the optics of Ibn al-Haytham in the very light that traveled across impossible distances to reach his eye. He had come to Baghdad to learn how to read the story of the stars. He had discovered that the language of that story was woven from logic, numbers, and light, and that the quest to understand it was a collaborative, multi-generational effort. He was a link in a great chain of knowledge, stretching back to the ancient Greeks and Indians, and stretching forward into a future he could not imagine. He was a part of something vast, noble, and beautiful. He had found his place in the universe, and it was a place of quiet, luminous understanding. The seasons of Zayn's life continued to turn, each one fuller and richer than the last. The dark hair of his youth silvered at the temples, then turned the color of desert sand. The lines on his face, etched by years of focused thought and quiet smiles, deepened. He was no longer the student, but the master. Young men, much like he had once been, now came to him for guidance, their eyes shining with the same eager curiosity that had once propelled him across the desert. He taught them what his own masters had taught him. From Ishaq he passed on the meticulous art of translation, the respect for the voices of the past. From al-Khwarizmi he shared the elegant power of algebra, the beauty of abstract reason. And from Hassan he imparted the most crucial lesson of all, to look at the world with open eyes, to question everything, and to trust the evidence of careful observation. The House of Wisdom flourished. It was a beacon, drawing the brightest minds from across the known world. Its libraries swelled with books, its courtyards echoed with a dozen languages, and its gardens were a fertile ground for ideas that would shape the course of history. Zayn watched it all with a deep and abiding sense of gratitude. He had been privileged to live and work in this extraordinary place during this golden time. But as the years piled up like autumn leaves, he began to feel a gentle pull, a quiet yearning for the silence and simplicity he had known as a boy. The city, for all its wonders, was a constant symphony of human activity. His soul longed for the pure, uncluttered music of the wilderness. One day, he announced to his students and colleagues that he was leaving. He was not retiring from the life of the mind, but seeking a different kind of library. He packed a few simple belongings, a change of robes, a water skin, a small bag of dates and bread, and 2 books. the volume of Persian poetry that Yusuf had given him so long ago, and his own hand-copied edition of Euclid's Elements. He also took a small, perfectly crafted brass astrolabe, a gift from the astronomers at the observatory. He did not journey back to his home village, which now existed more vividly in his memory than it likely did in reality. Instead, he traveled south, into the great, empty expanse of the desert. He found a small, abandoned stone dwelling near a secluded oasis, where a few date palms offered shade and a small spring provided clear, sweet water. This was to be his final home. His days fell into a simple, meditative rhythm. He would wake with the sun, pray, and eat a simple meal. He would spend the mornings reading, not with the intense focus of a translator seeking to dissect every word, but with the slow, contemplative pleasure of a man revisiting old friends. He would walk for hours in the desert, marveling at its stark, minimalist beauty. He saw the geometry of the wind-carved dunes, the intricate biology of a tiny desert flower, the physics of heat shimmering above the sand. The world itself was his text now, and he read it with a heart full of wonder. The story ends on one such night. Zayn, now a very old man, his beard as white as salt, sits by a small, crackling fire outside his stone hut. The fire is a small point of warmth and light in a vast, cool darkness. Above him, the sky is a spectacle of impossible grandeur. With no city lights to dim their brilliance, the stars are a torrent of diamonds scattered across black velvet. The Milky Way is a luminous river, a cloud of celestial dust stretching from horizon to horizon. He holds the brass astrolabe in his gnarled hands. The metal is cool to the touch. He lifts it, its familiar weight a comfort. He sights the pole star through the instrument's viewer, just as he had done 1,000 times before. He aligns the rete, the intricate star map, with the plate for the current date. The instrument tells him the time, the position of the constellations, the silent, orderly turning of the cosmos. But he no longer needs the instrument to know these things. The knowledge is not just in his head, it is in his bones, in his soul. He has spent a lifetime learning the language of the universe, and now he can feel its rhythms as intimately as his own heartbeat. He lowers the astrolabe and simply looks up, his old eyes filled with a profound and tranquil peace. He thinks back on his long journey, the boy on the rooftop, the dusty traveler, the young scribe, the respected scholar. He remembers the scent of old parchment in the translation hall, the excited voice of Al-Khwarizmi explaining Al-Jabr, the gasp of discovery in a dark room with Hassan. He remembers the faces of his teachers, his colleagues, his students, a great family of minds united by a common love for knowledge. He sees it all now as a single, beautiful pattern, as elegant and irrefutable as one of Euclid's proofs, a life spent in the peaceful quest for understanding. He had not sought wealth or power or fame. He had sought only to read the story of the universe. And in the end, he had discovered that the story was about connection, the connection between a star and an eye, between a number and a truth, between one generation of thinkers and the next. A soft desert wind whispers past, carrying the scent of cool sand and dry herbs. The fire crackles, sending a few sparks spiraling up into the infinite darkness, like tiny, fleeting stars rejoining their celestial brethren. Zayn closes his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips. He feels no regret, no fear, only a vast and overwhelming sense of gratitude. He is a small part of this magnificent, patterned whole. His life has been a single, quiet verse in an epic poem of discovery. And it is enough. Under the silent, watchful gaze of the stars, the old scholar, the boy from the village, drifts into a deep and peaceful sleep, his dreams filled with the soft, shimmering light of 1,000 suns.